We can get started here today. Perfect. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the second session of day 2 of the Public Legal Education Association, or PLEAC's Virtual Fair. In case you missed our first session today, my name is Hannah Holmes, and I'm the Program Director here at PLEAC. It's wonderful to have all of you here today, and we are here to continue exploring the topic of community justice help, keeping community front and center. We are very, very grateful to all our moderators, panelists, and participants for making this event possible overall. So a huge thank you as always. And while we are meeting virtually from across the country, I am personally joining you from Toronto, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. We do encourage you to use the chat and Q&A functions throughout the event to share comments, ask any questions you may have, engage with one another. We will definitely have some time in our session today for any questions that you may have further at the end. So please feel free to share through it, but we will hope to do our best to get to all of those. And then finally, don't forget, if you have a quick second to answer a survey that might pop up at the end or in an email later on, just for any feedback that you might have. This helps us improve our future events, of course. So that's sort of my, sort of admin pieces at the beginning. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our session titled Community Justice Work on the Ground. I'm delighted to introduce you to our moderator today, David Wiseman, Associate Professor in the Faculty of Law at the University of Ottawa, and pass it over to David to get us started today. So thanks so much, David.
Thanks very much, Hannah, and hi, everybody. I'm zooming in with you from the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples from the Ottawa area. As you can tell from my virtual background, spoiler alert, we don't have flowers blooming here just yet, but I'm trying to channel that energy. I was sorry I couldn't be at the earlier session today, but as part of our effort to advance reconciliation, decolonization at the faculty, we have a regular reading circle of Indigenous authors' books, and I was long ago booked for a reading circle of Richard Wagamese's, can't work out where to hold it so you can see it, One Drum, which I highly recommend. So I was doing that earlier today, but I'm delighted to be here with you now. So the format for this afternoon session is that we're going to try to focus on the issue of community justice work on the ground. And we have two special panelists with us to help talk about that in a Q&A format. So we have first, as you can see on your screen, Dr. Laura Winters, who is the lead executive officer at Stella's Circle in St. John's, Newfoundland, and Karen Sierra, who is the housing hub manager, amongst other things, at Romero House in Toronto. And our third panelist is unable to join us, that was on the initial program, Hannah Hutchinson from Nunavut. But we're delighted to have Laura and Karen with us. And so the format is going to be that I'm actually going to give a short framing presentation about the idea of community justice help for 10 minutes or so. And then we'll move into a Q&A segment with Laura and Karen to explore their experiences in working in this area. So without further ado, I'll just put a PowerPoint up to guide my framing remarks. And here we go, just getting that available. Fiddling with my screen a little bit, apologies. Just this, the purpose of my initial remarks is just to try to say a bit about sort of what this idea of community justice help is, so that we're all on the same page initially, before we go into the panel session. And some of this may be familiar to some of you from previous PLEAC meetings, but for others it might be new. So the idea of community justice help, it's a label that it's been attached by various folks, including Julie Matthews and myself. I've worked on this topic with Julie Matthews, who's, of course, the former Executive Director of Community Legal Education Ontario, for a number of years, exploring the role, basically, of frontline workers at community-based organizations in helping people with their everyday problems that have or that often have a law-related element. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about community justice help. And over the past few years, we've put together a few reports exploring this area. One is the Community Justice Help report, which provides a general framework. Then there's a broader report, Shifting the Paradigm report, which tries to identify community justice help activity and associated sort of regulation frameworks across Canada and in comparative jurisdictions. And then most recently, a snapshot report, which is ultimately going to be the focus of our session this afternoon, where primarily Julie, in that case, identified 30 or so organizations across Canada who are involved in the provision of community justice help and profiled their activities. And that's what we're going to hear a bit more from Karen and Laura about later. So what I wanted to initially talk about was some of the general framing and why did we choose to examine community justice help, and why do we think it's important to continue examining it? Well, as everyone here knows, I think community workers in the not-for-profit sector are providing essential, good quality help to people who come to them with problems that may involve the law. And this is important and should be maintained, and we think, in fact, supported and enhanced wherever possible. But one of the things that we were hearing about when we were initially starting to look into this area was that community justice help was being sometimes halted, other times hampered, other times chilled by what we refer to as the dividing line approach to regulating and distinguishing sort of who can help and to what extent with law-related problems. And that dividing line tends to put legal information on one side and legal advice on the other, and tries to say that only people who are lawyers or equivalents in jurisdictions across Canada can be involved in anything more than providing legal information. And so this, obviously, to the extent that community justice help might do things beyond providing legal information, it's potentially vulnerable to being regarded as having inappropriately stepped across this line. So what types of help are we talking about where potentially these sort of issues might be raised? Well, in the various reports, including in the snapshot report, we identify a number of types of services that organizations provide, such as giving information and referrals in relation to legal matters, supporting clients in navigating systems or processes, helping clients understand and complete forms and documents for participating in legal processes or claiming legal rights and entitlements, helping people prepare for courts, and accompanying people to legal appointments or to courts. So this is a collection of activities which we would generally put within the basket of community justice help. So if that's what community justice help is, then part of our question was, well, to find out more about who's providing it and in what ways. And what our sort of discussions with people and exploration of this area revealed, as it has revealed to others, including in the Trusted Help report done previously by the Law Foundation of Ontario, is that, it's community justice helpers, or in other words, frontline workers at community-based organizations who are doing this work sort of every day. And some of the attributes that we found in the way that folks are doing their work, many of you potentially, is that the community justice helpers are knowledgeable and skilled in the areas in which they work on a daily basis. And so they're providing these forms of community justice help in their areas of experience and day-to-day expertise. They work within not-for-profit ethical infrastructure that strives to protect the dignity and welfare of clients. And they they provide support that responds to clients' multifaceted needs in a holistic way that's grounded in the reality of the lives of the folks they're helping and in the community and the supports that are available in that community to their clients. So this is a very distinct way in which these services are provided. And for us, this itself suggests a model of what good quality community justice help is. And we distilled that model into this, maybe it's a circle, maybe it's a donut of what we think are sort of attributes of good quality community justice help, or the features of good quality community justice help. And so there we capture, having the right knowledge, skills, and experience, doing it in a not-for-profit organization and within a deliberate ethical infrastructure, and doing it in a way that's holistic and understands the multiple dimensions of the situations that people can be in. Put those things together and you have good quality community justice help. So having identified that as important features, where we end up in sort of thinking about how to support this area is that we think that there's a few important things that should guide moving forward. That community justice help should be acknowledged and supported as a vital system of a broader justice ecosystem, and seen as an essential part of that system. We should all be aware of the potential chilling effect of using this dividing line between legal information and legal advice in terms of thinking about the role of community justice helpers. And our proposal is that, in fact, what we should be concerned with is just good quality and supporting good quality community justice help. That's what's important, not where it sits in relation to this sort of potential regulatory dividing line. So we believe then in identifying and utilizing exceptions and other applicable regulatory provisions that might permit community justice help. And our Shifting the Paradigm report tries to sketch that out a bit. And we believe in learning more about community justice help activity and raising awareness about it, which is what was the point of the snapshot report and of course our session today. So now I'm just going to pivot then to talking a little bit more about that snapshot report before moving into our panel portion. So the snapshot report is now available on the Department of Justice website, and there's a link there in that slide. And it really is a snapshot. It just describes very briefly 30 non-legal community-based organizations who are engaged in one or another form of community justice help. And it focuses on organizations giving one-on-one assistance to people with issues such as housing, income assistance, work or living in Canada, intimate partner violence, and other issues. And it aims to cover a diverse field, both in terms of substance, but also in terms of geography, a range of communities in a range of sectors, and to help identify and share information about them. Looking at the 30 organizations and their services, and of course we'll hear more from Karen and Laura in a minute, we noticed this about the nature of the problems in the services. The services are framed in different ways as community services, social services, health services, settlement services, but not typically legal services. Yet the law is often interwoven into the problems relating to housing, income support, and etc. that workers in these organizations are seeing every day, and that it's the mandate of the organizations to address. The problems usually have many dimensions, not even necessarily exclusively or even primarily legal, but law can be implicated in one way or another. And so these organizations are giving multidimensional help, responsive to clients' multidimensional needs and goals. And so in terms of thinking about what's learned from this snapshot, fits in with the type of framework that I've already mentioned in terms of good quality features of good quality community justice help. The importance of holistic help is clear in this work. The liaison role that community justice helpers can play, connecting clients to good supports and referrals. Many organizations note that they have accountability structures for the work they do. They're engaged in knowledge sharing and support from working in partnership across their other organizations and other associations and networks that support their work. And public legal educations, for instance, organizations are often providers or supporters in terms of training and other involvements. So, in conclusion, then, moving forward, the general idea that Julie and I would put forward is that, we need greater recognition again of the broader justice ecosystem and seeing community justice help as an essential part of that. We want to encourage clarification by legal regulators that they don't want to halt, hamper, or chill this sort of work, and that could take a number of different approaches. And we think there ought to be more research, pilots, and collaboration, perhaps some sort of national working group or something to explore and advance this work more fully. And so in keeping with that, we want to facilitate conversations about the work that people are doing in this area and encourage everybody to continue to learn from each other. So that brings us then to the panel portion, where I'm going to moderate a conversation with Karen and Laura, touching on this sort of community justice help from their perspective. So take a breath. Sorry if I was talking a little bit rapidly there, but I wanted to try to preserve time for the panel. So let me just briefly say a little bit more about Karen and Laura before I throw out a question to them. So Dr. Laura Winters is, as I mentioned, lead executive officer at Stella's Circle in St. John's, Newfoundland. She's a sociologist, adjunct professor, research fellow, and community worker. In her academic life, Laura researches stigma resistance. Laura's been working with community organizations in her home city of St. John's for over a decade, and currently is LEO of Stella Circle, a social justice organization that offers housing, mental health, and employment services to adults facing barriers. And we'll hear more about Stella Circle in a moment. And then Karen Sierra is currently housing hub manager, amongst other things, at Romero House in Toronto. And Karen's an engineer originally from Colombia who came to Canada as a refugee claimant. Her own journey has led her to work in settlement and advocacy. As the housing hub manager at Romero House, she leads the intake program, ensuring that newcomers feel welcomed and supported as they navigate the refugee process. She also oversees a team that helps claimants find housing, settle into their new lives, and connect with community supports. So we've come up with some questions that I'm going to put to Laura and Karen, and we'll go through some cycles to hear what they say. You're welcome, if something catches your attention as we go along, to put a question to us, and we can work with Hannah in the background to put those to Karen or Laura as we go along or at the end. So we want to start then, and perhaps I'll go to you first, Laura. Can you tell us a bit about Stella's Circle, the community you serve, the services you provide on a regular basis, particularly services that may involve the law in some way, such as helping clients with forms or documents or supporting them with system navigation, those types of things?
Thanks, David, and hi to everybody joining. I'm Laura. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm joining from Uktuhamguk, the homeland of the Beothuk, whose culture has been lost forever, and the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. And so I do lead Stella's Circle. We are a social justice organization, and I'm just going to share a very brief PowerPoint just to show a little bit about our organization. Okay, here we go. So our tagline at Stella's Circle is creating community together, and we see that in the community that we create with the folks we're privileged to serve, with our own staff teams who have a huge diversity of experience, and with our partners within government, within community organizations. We are very much a part of an ecosystem here in St. John's that supports individuals who are marginalized. And so we see that ourselves within that ecosystem and see those partnerships as a huge piece of everything that we do. Our own services happen in the areas of housing and homelessness, mental health and addictions, employment and education. We also operate an inclusion choir, and we have programming that's holistic and therapeutic. And then we also operate social enterprises. So it's quite a diversity of programs happening within Stella Circle. We are the largest community organization in St. John's, and it's the diversity of these services and the wraparound nature of the programs that we're able to offer that is the real magic of Stella Circle. Rarely does somebody come in and only touch one part of the organization. So in terms of housing, we are actually the third largest provider of affordable housing in Newfoundland and Labrador, behind only the province itself and the municipality of St. John's. We currently operate 133 units of affordable housing and counting. We are deeply committed to responding to the affordability crisis and the housing crisis. And so we are always seeking opportunities to build more units and to keep those units affordable, and also to serve folks who are at the greatest vulnerability around housing insecurity and housing them in those units. We also operate Naomi Center, which is pictured on the bottom there. It is Newfoundland and Labrador's only emergency shelter for young women and gender diverse folks experiencing homelessness. And we operate from a harm reduction model within that setting. We also run the Brian Martin Housing Resource Center, and this is a center that folks can walk into throughout the week, and we have teams that are doing housing case management. So when folks come in, they're experiencing homelessness, they can get assigned with somebody that will help support them with that, with their housing searches. Our teams are in and out of other shelters across the city, and really the intent of that work is to help support folks transition into stable housing that meets their needs, and then provide them the supports they need to remain stably housed. So a huge piece of our work is in that housing area. We also have a pillar where we operate clinical and therapeutic services around mental health and addiction. We're doing a lot of onlys at Stella Circle. So we are operating the only community-based residential treatment center in the province, Emmanuel House. And this is a program that folks can come into, stay for up to 6 months. It typically is for folks who are moving through other programs, maybe offered by our province, that are much shorter in length, and this is giving them that support they need when they exit those programs to live independently in community. Our community support program is an intensive case management program. Folks might be familiar with ACT, assertive community treatment teams within healthcare settings. This is a community version of that. So we have a caseload of 50 individuals accessing this program. Our teams are out in their homes every single day. They're doing medication management and delivery with them, and it's the only program operated by community that does that level of care and service. So folks in that program typically would be institutionalized in some way, shape, or form were it not for the interventions of that program. And we are typically seeing folks with severe and persistent mental health diagnosis alongside challenges around addiction and involvement with the criminal justice system. The Just Us Women's Center is our women and gender diverse serving program for folks who have experience with criminal justice involvement. You may be aware that Newfoundland and Labrador does not have an Elizabeth Fry Society, and so this program in a big way fills that gap. And our team is out to the Women's Correctional Institute in Clarenville, about an hour and 45-minute drive away, 2 days a week, offering programming. And then when people get released from there, they come and get connected here in St. John's with our programs and services tailored specifically for that population. And then our employment services, in the same way that we offer services around housing, mental health, and addiction, we also offer those around employment. So individual and group-based programming to help people meet their own goals and needs around employment. We also offer an adult basic education program. So there is an educational component. And then we run social enterprises. So these are opportunities we have to be employers where we can have folks that access our services and programs actually move into a workplace setting that we operate. We operate a number of food-based social enterprises, including the Hungry Heart Cafe and Stella's Brasserie. We operate commercial cleaning and a construction social enterprise, so folks can really learn a diversity of skills in those settings. And then I will say as well, again, the community that we serve are really folks who are facing barriers to meeting the goals they have in their lives and to accessing services as they're intended to be accessed. So it's really for people who have barriers to having their needs met and to accessing the system, including the criminal justice system. So we really are the bridge to those systems for folks. And while we do, again, have a vast range of services here internally, the deep partnerships we have are really the key to our success in helping people meet their own goals. So I will stop sharing. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. It's an incredible array of programs and services that Stella Circle is offering. So we'll dig in a little bit more as we go along. I'll ask Karen now if Karen, you can tell us a bit about Romero House, what Romero House does, and your role in the organization.
Thank you, David. As you mentioned before, my name is Karen Sierra, working as the Housing Hub Manager at Romero House. My pronouns are she, her. We are located in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm going to share a small presentation about Romero House. Let me see. Are you seeing my screen?
Yeah, it looks good. I think it's just on the right deck. Yeah.
Let me see, because now I can see you. Okay. Perfect. So as I mentioned before, I'm working for Romero House. We are a nonprofit organization. We are welcoming refugee claimants, specifically newly arrived claimants, and we help them in many different ways. One of the ways that we support claimants is with transitional housing. We provide temporary housing. It's up to a year for families specifically, and we have 4 houses and 1 apartment, a small apartment building. And within those houses, we have a wraparound support for the families we serve. At the moment, we have 20 families, about 80 people. So they come to Romero House. They can stay up to a year, but they can leave as soon as we find permanent housing for them. We have also a team of housing access coordinators that are in charge of supporting the claimants. And this is our center. We are located very close to High Park in Toronto, but we also offer some support for other people that are walk-ins, not specifically or not only for the claimants that we have in our houses, but for walk-ins that are also looking for the status, looking for support on the refugee process. And we provide orientation for them on the refugee system, legal advice, or we refer them to legal clinics. We support them finding lawyers, referring them to legal aid, and helping them finding a school, daycare enrollment, translation, sometimes interpretation because of the language barriers they face. We help them filling out the forms for the basis of claim and all the forms that they need to support the basis of claim in the refugee process. We help them with work permits and job searching. And we also have a program on Tuesdays that is Second Harvest. It's like a food bank where we also guarantee access to food. And one of our main roles is also doing advocacy for refugee claimants and doing warm and safe referrals for clients to other services. And I just wanted to share some of the pictures on how Romero House looks like. I think it's good to share a little bit about it. This is our roof where we planned with volunteers and also with the families. This is located here at the main building in Romero House. This is one of the other houses where we also have a program for gardening. And this is the back of Romero House. And one of like Romero House is also recognized for building community. So we have different programs as a women's group, kids club, art club. As I mentioned, Second Harvest. We celebrate together movies, birthdays, hearings, successful hearings, and different parties, different events where all are welcome. On terms of the community integration, we also connect them with housing support, education support, recreational support, employment, and healthcare. And on the advocacy part, we are doing all the efforts for refugee policies and changes in the system.
Thanks very much, Karen. Thanks for the photos. It looks great. So you talked, Karen, there about some of the ways in which Romero House is sort of directly involved in legal issues, because of course a refugee status determination is obviously a primary legal issue. So I just want to note that, and then but return to Laura for a minute and just ask Laura to tell us a little bit in similar vein about some of the ways in which folks at Stella Circle are involved in helping people with in the various programs that you've talked about in terms of navigating anything that might have a law related component.
Absolutely. I think a lot of the work that happens is really in helping folks access these systems that aren't necessarily designed in a way that they can easily access due to the challenges they're experiencing in their lives. So I think about some of the folks that we support who are deeply entrenched in addiction and whose lives look very chaotic. And so when they are involved in the criminal justice system, it's great that you get handed a piece of paper that says show up for court 3 weeks from Thursday. That's not something that's possible for many people in their life. And so we might be doing the work of physically supporting folks to actually get to those kinds of appointments, to access things like legal aid and to access those services that are so well intentioned and are built, for people with perhaps a certain level of functioning and capacity in their lives that not everybody that we serve has, because of the barriers they face and because of the ways they're marginalized by those very systems. And so there's a huge amount of system navigation. There's a huge amount of referrals and filling out of forms. A great deal of that happens in the housing realm, certainly. I think about, for instance, some folks we've supported recently through the Residential Tenancies Act when, they are being brought forward to court around damages that might be occurring in their units and landlords trying to recoup. So I know that's sort of legal light and a softer, version of the legal system. But, that's a really concrete example that we come up against all of the time in our housing services. We also support many individuals who do have histories of criminal justice involvement and criminal records themselves. And so in some cases, we're employing them. So we're actually working with them to help, navigate those steps to employment. And some of the places where our social enterprises work and clean might need certain steps to help an individual who has a criminal record be able to go work in that environment, even though they're employed through us. So there's a whole range of ways across all of our programs, including that system navigation, the provision of services, that we're helping folks access those services.
Great, thank you. And just if I can touch on one point there before going back to Karen, then Karen mentioned that there's referral to legal services is part of the framework at Romero House. Is that also part of how Stella Circle operates? Like clearly you're you folks are helping people with system navigation and forms that, as you say, and then there's other entities in the community that you're referring out to as needed.
Absolutely. And that happens across all of our programs, but particularly so in some of the programs that are more focused on supporting folks with histories of criminal justice involvement. One concrete example that I can think of that where we do a lot of referrals to a community organization who is linked really closely to legal is the Journey Project in Newfoundland. And so that exists to support individuals who've experienced sexual violence and understanding and knowing their legal rights, and then in navigating that legal system associated with that. So as Stella's Circle, when we have folks disclose that experience, we're immediately making that connection. And then that organization is helping them navigate the legal system in a really intentional and trauma-informed way. So I think that's one really concrete example of a community partner that's doing that work, and in partnership with PLEAN. That's an excellent program here in St. John's, the Journey Project.
Great, thank you. So to you, Karen, then, as I said, you mentioned obviously helping folks with refugee status determination process, and then, but then there's a range of other services that you're trying to support people in relation to housing and that. And I mean, similarly to what Laura has said, do you find that you're apart from helping people with refugee status determination, you're helping them with housing issues or employment issues that might involve sort of legal elements?
Yeah, I was thinking while you were asking the question, most of the time refugees came and they are lost. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to start. So what we hear most frequently is someone with a story, and what we do is deeply listening and caring about what they're saying, because that's what is leading us to the resources that we are going to provide. So they don't know how the process starts. So we usually help them looking for lawyers, help them looking for legal aid, applying for legal aid, applying for Ontario Works as social assistance, and all the barriers that they face with the system. The system is very complex and difficult to navigate. We help them with a couple of tips and instructions on how to do their narrative, how to communicate with the lawyer, because that is something that is important. And then it's something that changes between countries. So they don't know even how to communicate properly with lawyers. They don't know what it's legal aid covering for them. So we take the time to explain, this is what legal aid will cover for you. This is your role and responsibilities. This is lawyers' roles and responsibilities. When we don't have lawyers on site, but when we think that is needed, we connect them with legal clinics, and also we advocate for them if they are having issues with the lawyers. We advocate for them if they're having issues with Ontario Works and social assistance. I think housing is also part of the community legal system, as they overcome many different barriers when they come. We have house people that have to be unfortunately on the streets for days, and then we are facing those barriers together. We are trying to accompany them during this whole journey. And yeah, I think that's mainly the legal part that we're working with them.
Thanks, Karen. And of course, we have to recognize that in different jurisdictions, in Ontario and Newfoundland and Labrador are examples, to what extent there is a legal aid system, to what extent those sort of formal justice legal services are available is quite different. And so then there's different responses and relationships. Okay, so could I ask you then, maybe I'll stick with you, Karen, could I ask you to tell us a little bit then about, who in the organizations, like yourself is doing this sort of work, and what are their sort of formal or training or whatever, or what is their more experiential or skills development sort of profile that equips them to be able to to help in these ways? Who's doing it, and sort of how do they come to be doing it?
Sure. So we have a multi-diverse team with different backgrounds. We have people coming from many different nationalities. For the houses that I mentioned, we have six companions. They are helping specifically those families, those 20 families that we have, and they are like working together with them. They live in the same neighborhood, in the same houses, so they are more like connecting like neighbors, family, giving them the support they need to settle and to integrate in the country. And for the intake program, we have two placement students. They usually are from community worker or social worker background, or they are studying social worker, sometimes mental health as well. And we have a variety also of volunteers. We have receptionists and lawyers sometimes that came to volunteer with us, or legal students that are also doing the placement with us. They are also helping with permanent resident work permit applications and other legal issues that they might give some advice. I think one of the main characteristics on our team is the welcoming and safe space that we provide to clients, and also the deeply care that we have for our community. We are embracing them and accepting them and helping them in the journey. It's not an easy journey to have, and especially because of the trauma experience that they have had. Sometimes it's quite difficult to share those experiences and quite difficult to listen to them. But we embrace all the experiences and help them in the best way that we could possibly do it. And that's our main team. But of course, in the background, we have other people like maintenance, operations, more people in the logistics, financial stuff, that we are all part of the same team.
Okay, thanks, Karen. And so, same question to you, Laura. Sort of what does the team look like at Stella Circle? Obviously, you have a big team there. What are their backgrounds and skill sets, and how do they come to be doing the work in the organization?
Thanks. First of all, uplifting what Karen said, that the philosophy and the approach is so very important in serving the needs, particularly of marginalized populations. And so we do have 150 staff serving around 1,500 people a year, and that staff is incredibly diverse. So it depends on the position. Obviously, we have some positions where social work background is required. We have others where experience in navigating the housing system is required. We have carpenters working in our social enterprises and running those pieces. So the skill set is incredibly diverse depending on the area of the organization. I think what is kind of continuous throughout is the philosophy and approach. And so we work from a harm reduction philosophy of recognizing that it's our job to help reduce the harms that folks might be experiencing in their lives through really meeting them where they're at. And I think that non-judgmental approach is so very important. And unfortunately, when folks have negative interactions with systems, including the criminal justice system, that builds a relationship with them to those systems that we can help mitigate and mediate that relationship in a really important way. So because we come from that non-judgmental place, because we meet folks where they're at, and because we work from that approach, I think trauma-informed is another, it's language that's used a lot that doesn't necessarily get explained. And really it's about building safety and trustworthiness with folks, being strength-based and skill building, and recognizing the inherent skills it takes to navigate the world when you are experiencing all these forms of marginalization, and offering power and control where possible to folks. Like those, in a nutshell, that's what trauma-informed approach is all about, in partnership with recognizing trauma and its impacts. And so we hire folks that have that philosophy, that recognize the individuals we serve as deserving of services, and as really that they have the dignity and they have the power to define their own futures, and it's our role to help support them get there. We're not in the business of saving people. We're not wearing any capes over here. Folks that we serve are doing the work, and we show up every day and try to support them in that. So that philosophy is hugely important. And I would say as well, people are flexible. They're willing to meet the needs of the folks that we serve. And I think a really interesting example recently in the Just Us Women's program, they were hearing women talk about the stigma of having a criminal record. And some women, that record had been in their lives for a very long time. So we partnered with Elizabeth Fry I think in Nova Scotia, and they came here and we did some record suspension clinics, which was hugely impactful for the women that were able to access that service. And so no matter what area folks are working in, they are recognizing the skills and strengths of people that we serve and responding to them. A really interesting area that is, I think, happening across the community sector in Canada really is this concept of peer support. And that's something we take really seriously in the organization. So more and more, we're trying to hire people with lived expertise in the areas that we serve. And we're trying to shift our human resource practices to be able to uplift that expertise in the same way that we do academic knowledge or knowledge that the world tells us is the kind of knowledge you need to do this work. And we're saying, no, the skills, the expertise that comes with lived expertise and living expertise is actually so important and valuable here, and in some cases more impactful than the letters I got after my name, that's for sure. So I think those are things that are happening within our organization. We're trying to shift the who's doing this work, what it looks like, and have people that are accessing our services see themselves reflected in the staff doing that offering.
Unmute. Someone had to talk while muted. I got that out of the way. Thanks, Lauren and Karen. And I mean, just pausing on there for a minute when you're mentioning sort of meeting people where they're at, and then the peer or the journey sort of accompaniment with folks, and acknowledging and respecting and trying to enable their own capacity to manage, solve their own challenges with support. I mean, I think those are two very critical elements of community justice help in general. It's sort of part of the method is to be joining people where they're at, and finding a way to address a range of problems, including potentially the law-related elements, in those ways that are more where people are at, and more respecting their autonomy or their capacity as they navigate through processes, is maybe an important quality of community justice, just community help in general, and community justice help. Is that I mean, that sounds similar in both Romero House and Stella Circle. So then in terms of, you've talked about sort of who you look for to fill positions, or to be part of your team to help people. Could you tell us a little bit, and I'll go back to you, Karen, and then come back to Laura. How do you manage that within the organization? Like, once people are with you in terms of training or support for their continued sort of work in the community and with clients, and how they sort of keep their skills and their knowledge where it needs to be for that sort of work. Do you try to do that yourself? Do you look to other organizations to connect them with, or is it combinations? What does that look like?
At the beginning, we pay especially attention to the onboarding process. We have a checklist on the onboarding of the employee, and we make sure that we met all those requirements, because it's very important for us, for Romero House. And one of the most important things is building the team. So we pay attention to that part, because I think at the beginning we could feel lost and we don't know where to go, who to ask. There are many questions every day. So building the team is one of the important things. We have a buddy also Every time that an employee joins us, we assign someone else beside the supervision and the other part of the team to just to be there, someone to reach out, someone that will listen to other needs, or someone to ask questions. I think it's important, and I haven't seen this in many organizations, but I think it's working. We also have ongoing and professional development. So every year we have different trainings like a trauma inform peer support. As Laura mentioned, I think it's very valuable and important. We also have on the volunteers and the staff former refugee claimants that have their own experience to share. And now, speaking from the employee perspective, they can also bring another kind of support to the people we served. We also have, like we are part of the list of updates for immigration, like IRCC, provincial updates, city and municipal updates. And we also have a group of the Ontario Coalition of refugee houses, where we also share the whole experiences we have. And then it's like kind of peer support within the organizations. We share best practices and challenges that we faced. And I think that's very valuable for the team because we could all feel that there is an outcome for the things that we are raising in the meetings. And in terms of supervision, we do monthly check-ins with our team just to make sure that things are going smooth. And we are pretty open to chat at any time because, as I mentioned before, this job that we're doing is not an easy one. So not every day looks the same. So it's good to be there for our team.
Thanks, Karen. And just before I throw to you, Laura, I'll let people know that the Q&A panel widget exists at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You're welcome to put questions in there as we go along if you like, or questions in the chat, and we can have a look at those, and we'll have some time in a few minutes to take questions as well. So Laura, to you then, what does training and support and supervision look like at Stella Circle?
So we have, of course, those distinct teams across the organization where there's a manager with oversight of each of those teams. And really the manager is very tapped into what's happening on the ground with the folks being served by the team and what trainings might need to come about like above and beyond our average to help support the folks that we are supporting. So for example, in our community support programs, there was some experiences around specific mental health diagnoses. And so the team went out and got trained on DBT therapy and the use of that to support these challenges. So that's one example of how we might give specific training. Overall, though, we do have some trainings that everybody that gets hired with the organization has to have, including assist, suicide intervention, crisis de-escalation. And if folks don't have those, we help them get that at the beginning before they come into the employment settings. And we also internally have a system where we have trained the trainers for those specific areas so that we have assist trainers in-house that can then help support all the teams, and we'll do so many trainings a year in these various areas that we are requiring and that staff have to be up to date on in order to go to work across the organization. And that's really effective. And we're actually really interested in that because I think we're interested in uplifting the knowledge of the staff we have, and many of them are trained in lots of areas and then offer that within teams. We are in the future going to be looking at exploring training as a social enterprise in and of itself, because there's a lot to offer here for other organizations. And I think of legal professionals as groups that might like to have a trauma-informed practice training or, training in an area that would help support them in making those connections with their clients in different ways. And so I think that's a really interesting thing to explore in terms of partnerships in the future when we do think about training. In terms of the peer support, we have an interesting model where there's an organization called LifeWise in St. John's who exclusively offers peer support. So they run a warm line where you can call, talk to a peer, and they actually they employ and train individuals, and we sort of second them over to our organization then. So we pay for their salaries, but we pay that organization. So they are deeply expert in peer support and the kind of training that might be needed to move from being in your own experience and expertise and then offering support to someone else around that with appropriate boundaries and all the things that need to be in place. So they actually do that training, and then we hire folks through them to be peer support workers in our organization. So that's like a really wonderful partnership where we're able to connect, and we know folks are coming with a specific level of training and they are peer support experts, and we don't have to have that expertise in-house.
Okay, thank you. I think there's one more question at least that I'll put to you both before we can see if there's any questions from folks who are listening. And so this one sort of focuses in again maybe on the sort of interconnections on legal problems or legal issues. Could you say a little bit more, and understanding that the organization's mandates are different, and about how your organization works with other service providers in the community, particularly the legal ones, and how you sort of manage those relationships, and whether there's any secrets to those relationships working well. Karen, can I go to you first?
Sure. I think communication is the key of having those good relationships. And when we're referring clients, we do warm referral. We don't refer the client just with contact information. We try to do our best to stay with them on the line, to make sure that they get the support they are looking for. So, for example, we have the refugee law office where claimants are not sure if they are candidates to have a refugee process. We refer them to the refugee law office. We do the call with them. We wait for the interview. If it's needed, sometimes we provide the interpretation for the calls. Same we do with legal aid. We do have like groups, focus groups within the Ontario Coalition to be able to communicate all those concerns with legal aid if we have some. And we do the referrals always by phone, trying to communicate with the agents and have clear communication on the issues the client is having. Sometimes they don't know how to communicate things, so we are there to support them to easier the communication. As I mentioned before, we also have the Ontario Coalition of Refugee Houses. So we have many different professionals there to reach out, lawyers, people that have years of experience in immigration, settlement, and refugee process. So that's part of our main database. We also have community agencies and shelters that when we cannot provide housing, we call them and partner with them to find better outcomes for people when central intake is out capacity. And on the side of advocacy, we collaborate with groups like the Canadian Council of Refugees. So we are part of the meetings. We are in the side of advocacy for changing of policies and a fair refugee system.
Thanks, Karen. And just before, sorry, Laura, just before I go to you with that question, Karen, I guess I'm wondering, to what extent do you think that Romero House or you and your work are, you're really concerned or worried about, this dividing line or whatever in terms of, legalists? Is it, are you doing the right thing in relation to what level of help you're providing with law-related problems? Like, is that a key part of your thinking, or is it more, well, how do we get people the help that they need, and we'll help them with what we can help them with, and then we'll refer them warmly and through other things to other sources of help if they're not the ones we can provide? I'm just sort of wondering how large that issue sort of looms for you.
I think it depends on the situation. we really pay attention on what the client needs, and we know that we cannot provide the whole legal advice that maybe a lawyer can do or refugee law office can do. So we know that we are limited. So part of our process is that intake people, intake workers are listening to the situation. We have a specific process on how to get to the point on like or finding the services that the client needs. And then they come to me or to my supervisor for support and see if there is any other thing to do with the client. And most of the times we ended up referring them to lawyers because they need legal representation for the refugee hearing. They need legal representation to file the basis of claim. But it's a thin line that we are always thinking how to navigate this process without giving much of a legal advice, but a service, a guidance, and an orientation to the client.
Yeah, and you talked about sort of helping people with, formulating their basis of claim and that sort of thing. So in that sort of supported way of helping them work through a process, right, and then joining them with the help for the later stages or whatever. Okay.
Yeah. When there are like
thanks,
the
Karen.
specific,
Yeah.
Just one more thing. When there are like a specific questions that they want to like those questions, like they need the answer, but we cannot provide it. But because we know that it's like a legal issue, we better refer them as soon as possible because it's something that is out of our control. But we have like a specific guidelines, like for example, for writing the basis of claim. We don't provide them with the story or the things to say, but a structure so they know how to.
Yes.
Those kind of things that would help them at the end.
Okay, thanks. And so to you, Laura, then, so, firstly, thinking about how the relationships work with lawyers or other legal sort of services providers in terms of liaising with them and helping your clients in that way. And then maybe also, how large the issue of sort of who's authorized to do what looms in the way you operate.
Yeah, we've got some interesting relationships actually with criminal justice structures, I guess. So Correctional Services Canada actually provides some funding and holds spaces in some of our programs. So it's an interesting relationship where rather than us referring to them, they're referring to us, and we're working with folks that we're specifically holding spaces for there. And so then we get into those relationships. And in some cases, I think, depending on the individual, our frontline workers might be intimately connected with somebody's probation or parole officer, or they might be, the go-between for the lawyer, depending on the person's capacity. And so it's really depending on that individual. I think one example where we've really seen a need is in our Just Us Women's Center. There is a deep need around support for women who have had children removed. And so there's a whole host of issues around that. But we've just recently got funding for a family support worker or for children who are at risk of removal, so that family support worker can be the liaison to child protection services, to family court, because we know those are areas where women are really struggling, where stigma is a big issue around having criminal justice involvement when you interact with those systems, where people's own, whatever challenges might be going on in their lives might culminate in behaviors that aren't great when interacting with those systems. And so having that person sort of be there and be able to be the go-between and help the person in those circumstances is great. And so that's an example of a position that we've just recently hired through new funding we've sought to help specifically with that system. And I guess in terms of then legal advice, I think to what Karen said, we're not in the business of offering that. I think people do offer forms of advice depending on what the circumstance is. I honestly think that our frontline staff are so taxed. I get to be the face of the organization, but they are the heart and they are doing the work. And the work has only gotten more challenging, both in its scope and in the amount of it that there is. And so we've seen a shift from around 1,000 people a year accessing our services when I came to this organization 3 years ago to 1,500 right now. So that is indicative of the need. And I know it's here in this province and it's across Canada. You can feel it when you travel. Cities look and feel different. The challenges around homelessness, around mental health and addiction, and then the ways those challenges intersect with legal challenges and the criminal justice system is profound in people's lives and mean that more than ever they need the support of community organizations, many of whom have not seen funding increases to help shift and respond to these needs. So our staff are so taxed, I would say, if I ask them that that line is not something that shows up in their minds in their day-to-day lives. They are, as much as some of the people we serve, sometimes in survival mode and meeting the basic need in front of them. And so I think, yeah, that's what I would say to that. And really it's about where people are at when they are in crisis. We're trying to move along Maslow's hierarchy of need, and for them, the legal need might be at a level that they are not currently addressing. So I think a big part of our role is in helping meet those basic needs around housing, around mental health supports, helping folks move out of crisis so that they can have some stability and then deal with those challenges. And then we can do those warm referrals, we can help support, we can do those pieces of helping people interact with systems in a good way. So I think that's really what the work is that we do day to day.
Thanks, thanks so much. So we've got a few minutes left, and there's a couple of questions in the Q&A, and I don't know if Hannah has seen any others come in, but I think Laura and Karen, you can probably have a look at the Q&A, but there's a couple of questions there, and one is launching or connecting with the comment you made, Laura, and the comment is that the commenter really appreciates how you talked about recognizing the importance of lived experience when doing this work, and is just wondering if you've faced resistance to this concept, and if so, sort of where that comes from. How do you respond when faced with that sort of resistance?
I think the community sector has really evolved around this. From when I think about 15 years ago when I started in this work, and we would invite folks in who had lived expertise to a panel and give them a Tim's card and think that was okay, to shifting to actually honoring and paying people for what I think is a very specific form of expertise, to now recognizing we need those skills and strengths in our staff teams. So there's been an evolution in the community sector, and that's my experience, obviously, but I think many in the sector would mirror it. And there is resistance. I think we live in a credentialist world that tells us we need certain types of education or certain experiences to do certain kinds of work. And so where we might get some pushback from that is around funding. Our peer support work is 100% funded by donation. And so we receive very little funding from the government specifically for peer support. They are starting to recognize it more and more and integrate people with lived expertise into like walk-in counseling centers run by the health authority in this province. But when it comes to criminal justice, which is actually one of the main peer support areas in our organization, is that because the stigma is so deep that even accessing community support from a social worker, I might feel a lot better chatting to somebody with lived expertise. So there is a pushback. When we're faced with it, we really push to say this is a valid and important form of expertise. And we use that language. It's not lived experience, it's lived expertise. And we frame it in that way. And it's just something we're doing in all of our public discourse to try to push that forward, and in partnership with other community organizations with similar values, for sure, here locally.
Thanks. And Karen, did you want to offer any perspective on that in terms of, integrating the importance of lived expertise in the work of Romero House?
I think we face almost the same barriers as Laura. The funding that we have is private funding, We have also city funding, but it's very limited to the RGI housing we provide. But other than that, our clients are very happy to receive help from people that know how the process is and how to navigate the system, and to see them at the other end, like at the success end of the refugee process. So I think it's pretty much the same.
Okay, thanks. And there's another question, which I think we can probably fit in quickly, which is about sort of the whether your programs and services at your organizations are understood and supported by the local legal profession, or if there's more that could be done there to sort of whether there's a need to raise awareness and then foster those relationships to develop a sort of eco-justice of support. Do you have any thoughts on that? I'll go to you, Karen, and then to Laura.
I would say
or
that
either of you.
Thank you. I would say that we have a strong relationships with legal aid and with lawyers, because we are in Toronto and we are one of the cities that receives the most quantity of refugees and refugee claimants. It's a system that it's a little bit easier to navigate nowadays. But it's not simple. I think we still have a long journey in this legal process. So I think, for example, advocating for things like legal aid funding, we need more funding, we need more lawyers working with legal aid, and we need to expand a little bit the scope of the work that lawyers are doing, because the funding it's little for the work that they do. So most of the lawyers spend more time that the legal aid is paying to them. So I think those barriers. I would say also public education and raising awareness in the communities, not only legal but in general. That would also help to overcome all the system barriers that we are facing now.
I would say for us, for the most part, absolutely not. It's very siloed. I don't even think the majority of folks working in the mental health field within the system understand the scope of what's available in the community sector and can make appropriate referrals. And I think it's even more dire when I think about a legal aid lawyer and the massive amount of work they have in front of them and how they're just trying to stay above water and serve the folks in front of them. Knowledge of the community system and ecosystem is not something that they might have capacity for. So I think there's a huge untapped opportunity for somebody when they're supporting somebody that's coming out of incarceration, and to know where to go to get housing and where to direct folks around mental health and addiction and employment particularly. So I think there's a huge area there where we could do a better job as well in the sector of how we get that knowledge out there. I presented recently at the local, it was a panel of judges in Newfoundland and Labrador. And so like those kinds of opportunities are so important to help spread the word. And so I think that's a big piece of why we appreciate being here today so much. And I think we're open and want to build those relationships and partnerships, because it will help support folks in the long run.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks, Karen. I guess, Hannah, we're basically out of time. Is that right? Do we have to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I wish we had some more time, but I mean, I see some, a great comment in the chat as well for our panelists today. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate everyone's questions. Thanks for the feedback. I just want to say thank you, just overall. Thank you for joining us today. A huge, huge thank you to Laura, Karen, and David, of course, for sharing your time and expertise with us in our conversation today. This actually concludes our day 2 of our virtual fair, it kind of went in a blink, but it was a poignant day. So I really appreciate everyone's time joining. And we hope to see you tomorrow for our final day. It's our day 3 sessions are on evaluation tomorrow. So there's still time to register if you're interested in joining us. But again, we're right on time here. Thanks for David, to David for keeping us on time. I'm sure, we could have continued on, but really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you, Karen. And thank you, everyone. Hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
Thank you.